according to Gallup's business to business report, only 29% of business to business customers are fully engaged.
Ooh.
And 71% are at risk of leaving for a competitor.
Hi, and welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting.
This season, we're welcoming fellow coaches back to the show to explore how people can move beyond naming and claiming their talents to start to aim their talents. We're calling this season Strengths Applied. Our topic today is engaging customers, and you'll notice it's just Chad and I today. So without a third voice, you're just going to hear what we have to say on this topic. Why we picked engaging customers is because forever we've all heard that the customer is always right. And while that may or may not be true in every instance, it does speak to that we're all trying to get to the place where we are engaging customers and making sure that they feel seen and heard and important in the transactions that we're doing. So, Chad, I'm really curious what you have as far as stats to offer to this conversation.
Yeah, so a lot of the stats I found had a little bit more to do with business to business instead of business to customer, a direct customer. I know both you and I do a little bit of both. But the stats I came across with state that companies that solve for customer engagement move the needle on increasing the share of wallet by 2 to 3 times more than the average customer. If in comparison to those companies that only solve for customer satisfaction. So it's interesting, you've already brought up the engagement versus satisfaction.
Sure.
What's really interesting is that according to Gallup's business to business report, only 29% of business to business customers are fully engaged. I thought was really interesting.
Ooh.
And 71% are at risk of leaving for a competitor. So if you don't get this right, watch your customers, walk right to the next door or across the street and start talking to your competitors. What I also find really interesting, and this goes a little bit to my why of why I wanted to engage in this conversation with you, is that, for a long time, and I still do, put a lot of emphasis on employee engagement. And, I've had some past clients ask me, well, why such a focus on employee engagement? And for me, that's sort of a two-part answer. One is keep your people, and we've talked about that in previous episodes, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in future episodes. But really the impact is engaging your customers. If you don't have engaged employees, they're not going to be energized enough to engage with your customers. So this engaging customers component is the reason for this podcast is that it's the bridge between your engaged employees and then how do you engage your customers so that then you have loyal customers that keep coming back and providing you business. So that's a little bit of my why. I love what you said about, whether we address this question of whether the customer is always right and how you engage with them. So I want to start us off. You and I are both in business for each other, but we've also had previous roles. So what's been your experience in terms of engaging, let's call them external customers? Or maybe even internal customers. I know that you've done a lot of contract work. And so you're dealing with a lot of internal partners too. So maybe you're going to address both.
Yeah, sure. I love that you immediately jumped to that engaged employees equal engaged customers, because that was kind of my nugget for the end. So we're just going to keep building on that. So I love that we're both on that same thing. I think for me in past roles, it's always been about customer experience, the customer service, making sure the customer feels that they are right, that they have the support in whatever it is that they're doing, whether that was at my role working at Walgreens way back in the day, whether that was my role working at, I'm going to date myself if I say the name, we'll just say a shoe store throughout college. There's this level of making sure that you're attentive to the customer. And I think the best way to do that is really to to know what it is your customer needs, to be there, to be involved in what's going on. It brings to that deeper level of really understanding what the customer is needing and being able to fulfill that need. What about for you with your experience?
Yeah, so I've really had but my first of all, since you brought up high school and way back when kind of jobs, a lot of my jobs in that realm were a lot more behind the scenes. I was a dishwasher at a restaurant, so not a ton of customer engagement in real.
Oh, but important. Oh, but
Very
important.
important, very important. Just got to go out clean.
Yes.
Moving forward in my work history, I thought of really sort of three key sort of phases of my professional life. And I started off being an admissions counselor, so it was a lot about engaging kind of a two-pronged customer, engaging the student who really wanted to attend our institution, but also engaging the families that were essentially sending their kid off to college. They had concerns about finances and safety and whether we had the right programs. And so you're answering kind of two prongs. So I think it sort of builds on your statement of fulfilling what the customer needs. In that aspect, though, I was having two sets of needs. And we're going to get to which talents I leaned on to kind of manage that. But it is about figuring out what they need and then responding to it. And then also just sort of setting them up for success, right? You want them to not only have a great initial experience, but also who do you hand them off to? As an admissions counselor, I'm not providing the classes. So it's also about making the connections and making sure the reinforcement's there and the additional support. So there's that.
Sure.
I also have done a ton of engaging our alumni. I worked for my alma mater for almost 15 years, and engaging them. It's interesting dynamic. As a fundraiser, they're sort of past customers because they've attended the institution, but you're also asking them to contribute back. So you want to make sure that what they contribute back, you're recognizing, you're thanking them for, you're making them feel part of the organization. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth and making sure that they still stay connected and energized and engaged as alumni and sort of past clients, but transitioning their relationship. So that's been another part. And then now, you and I both run our own coaching businesses. So now I'm directly out, essentially doing that business to business or business, on occasion, I'll take the, an individual person, client, a one-on-one engagement. So I'm doing a little of B2B and a little bit of B2C. But it's, again, figuring out where they are, where they want to go, and then as a coach, helping them bridge that gap, so they can make the transformations they want to. And again, figuring out what they need, what their goals are, what pains that they're trying to deal with are, and then helping them move forward. And I think that something I'm going to get to in a little bit here, I think really sort of solidifies that circle of like how you engage somebody and get to know them all the way around to a place where you're retaining and trying to grow them, grow your relationship with them to make sure that they continue to have the support. So yeah, that's been my experience, at least in my professional life, sort of three different phases.
Yeah, I love that. And what it does is it speaks to me and that like the finding the need, right? So that was ultimately, and I don't know, maybe that extends to a strength. I don't think it's restorative because my restorative's relatively low, and we're going to get to strengths in a second. But it's that like solving the problems for me. Like that's where it's always come from, is that like finding the solutions or helping someone else find the solution that's right for them. And I think that's why coaching and strength specifically like has really spoken to me and what I do, is because it's all of my roles. Looking back, like Bill taught us in our last episode about entrepreneurship, is that like spending time to look back at your experiences and seeing your strengths in play. I think looking back, I can see like in every role I had, everything I was doing, there was some customer service type component to it. And ultimately, what I was doing in all of those roles was finding their need, and then helping them meet that in some way. So yeah, I've loved it as being a coach. So let's dive into what strengths we're using to do that, because
Yeah.
it sounds like we both had some experience in using our strengths and being able to live those out. So tell me, which of your talents do you feel like have proven most useful for you in this?
Yeah. So it's interesting as I got reflecting on, preparing for this topic and thinking about my strengths and, taking that looking backwards to kind of look
Mm-hmm.
forward approach. I want to focus on one talent in sort of a solo aspect, but then also have two sort of combos. We've talked before about how our
Yeah.
strengths never operate in silo or,
Right.
just one off. You're not just using one talent. So I want to highlight sort of some combos that really help me uh, engage customers and build those relationships. So the first one is learner, which is my number one. Surprise, surprise. I'm talking about it again. Um, this is a theme that normally resides in the strategic thinking domain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the places I've always tried to use it and have found it really helpful is in building relationships. It's getting to know people, asking the questions. Um, those of you that have dug in a little further about learner know that learner tends to go looking for information that has a very sort of near-term practical use. So
Yep.
if I'm asking questions of people, including my customers, whether it's the admissions, the students looking for admission at my first couple roles, or an alumnus that I'm trying to get to know, an alumna that I'm trying to get to know at my alma mater, or now with my customers, being able to ask those questions just helps to get to know them and really
Mm-hmm.
sets the stage for what the rest of the relationship is going to look like. Um, and it also just keeps me curious, right? There's always something extra to know about them or what their situation is or what their goals are, what their pains are. I mentioned that um,
Yeah.
in response to the last question you asked. Um, the the combos that I wanted to highlight, they're two sort of groupings, I would say. So the first one, and this is four theme combo. So deliberative, arranger, individualization, and harmony. And the reason I group those together is that all of them, really in my current role, help me think through customized coaching offerings and do a lot
Yeah.
of thought around that before even putting the proposal in front of clients. So when I use that learner to learn about what the background is, then it's those four that kick in and
Yeah.
then be like, okay, how can I structure a really good experience for my customers, for my coaching clients? Okay. And
Yeah.
then the other combo that then comes into play is responsibility and discipline. I group those together because those are the ones that help me stick to the plan, the things that I've promised to the client,
Yep.
that this is the plan to get you to where you want to go, and kind of helping them stick with it too, so that they have a good experience, that they actually make the transformations that they want to make. Um, but also the responsibility really kicks in and helps me fulfill commitments to build the trust. And as we know
Yeah.
from Four Needs of Followers episodes that we've done, um, you know, that trust is a real foundational component to having a really good customer service provider, business engagement,
Yep.
um, so that the relationship can move forward. So those would be the three that I know I listed a bunch more
Yeah.
talents than three. Sort of the three key components and what themes help me do that help me engage customers and build a solid relationship between them and myself.
Yeah.
What about
Oh,
you?
I love those, Chad. I love those combinations. Not at all surprised to hear your learner a number at number one, like showing up shiny
Yeah,
and bright for everyone. You're not going to be surprised at all to hear my belief is the one that I feel like I lean on the most. And like with you, I think I partner my empathy with that quite a bit. So there's a component to like using my values to see who I'm who I'm reaching and what I'm doing, like why this is important to me, and then really leaning heavily into my empathy to see like where they are, to put myself in their position, to understand what might be going on. What are the stories that I'm hearing, and what are their stories I'm not hearing? What's being left out? Like finding those like gaps even. And it's more of a feeling, like I feel what's being left out, not that they are specifically like pointing to certain things, or I can tell, or I know it on my own. It's something that's a deep feeling I get from my clients, and that's, I would say I can go back way back, and even see that in, some of my sales roles. It took a lot for me to be excited about selling furniture, but when I put it in the context of understanding how this space and what I was doing, the furniture that we were offering to our clients, how that met with the end user needs, oh, did that strike hard, so that was like, it hit in a really deep place for me, that, I wanted these families who were going through these horrible things and in the hospital to have comfortable furniture to sit on, to be comfortable when visitors came in and visited, for the wife who's there with her husband, overnight for days on end. That was so important to me. And so it struck in a different place, and it meant that I was reaching not just to my customer, the one who's buying it, but ultimately their customers too. And I think
Wow.
that's this like deep thing that happens when we are truly engaged in what we're doing, is you don't just affect, and I think you can agree with me in this too, that we as coaches aren't just affecting the lives of the people that we're working with. We're then touching everyone they work with indirectly, because throughout their understanding of their own talents and being able to see them in practice and use them for good for others, instead of as our super villain powers, they're now our superhero powers. We are then effectually and actually like reaching out and having interactions with all of those other people through the people that we coach. So there's that, I'm going to get off my box now. Like there is my belief and my empathy. You can hear it coming through strong. And then of course my responsibility. Oh my goodness. So if we said we were going to do something, if we, like we're are like set on a path that this is what we're doing, you can depend on us to make it happen. So regardless of what it was I was doing, like if there was a task that needed to be done, my achiever and responsibility loved to jump on those tasks and get them done because I knew it meant good things. So I think ultimately being responsible, having that responsibility talent that makes me trustworthy, it made for great interactions between like business to business, or even business to my like end users, the actual customers, even back in some of those high school jobs.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting to hear. First of all, I love the responsibility. That's one that you and I share, and has been somewhat a basis of this show, right? What
Yes.
happens when the two people with deliberative responsibility get together? That's the show.
Yep.
So the responsibility, I very much in tune with, in terms of building that trust. What was interesting to me to hear is you use your empathy to essentially sort of find those untold stories, or find the message that's being left out. And I wanted to add to that just by saying that if you don't have empathy, there are other talents you can lean on.
Yes.
I was going to just help our listeners by saying I get there somewhat through an analytical lens. I look at, okay, what is the data that is missing? And so not necessarily empirical, like the stats and everything. I know we did a lot of focus on me being the stat guy at the beginning of the show, but what data is this client not providing me? Or what information is being left out? Because then there's an opportunity to dig deeper. And then that kind of returns me to my learner. So it does take me maybe two themes to get to kind of you immediately sense where that information is missing. But I just want to point it out for our listeners.
Yeah.
Like, I sometimes come across, people and they're like, I really wish I had empathy, or I wish I understood people better on an emotional level. And it's okay. You can get there other ways. It's just about thinking about how do you find the unspoken information from your clients, your customers, those that you're engaging. So I just wanted to
Oh,
throw that out there. I'm not taking anything away from your empathy because
I love
that's
it.
an awesome superpower. I just want to reassure some of our listeners and be like, oh no, I'm missing all this information that Jen's getting and I'm not. You know, it could start to feel like they're missing out on something. It's just a matter of figuring out. I think the really important part that you brought forth was how do you find the unspoken,
Yeah,
the
thanks.
unspoken
Well,
information?
and thanks for bringing that point back around about talents, because we are only focusing on our own because those are the talents that we use. And like Chad has analytical, and we talked to Bill last time, and he has strategic and futuristic. Well, I don't have either of those. Those are, at the bottom. If I was going to try to be strategic and try to like think future forward, that's not something I could do on my own. So that's where I think it's wonderful. We all can get there. It's just what superpowers we use to do that. And I loved your using analytical to find the holes, to find those data points that are missing. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I will just say, we've just highlighted like two or three right here,
Right.
Bill's and ours. But if you go back to our season one,
Yes.
that covers all 34 themes, and you'll hear a lot of great coaches talk about how they get to some of the same places through very different themes.
Yes.
And also even within the same theme, what are
How
the
they use it
how are
differently.
the
Yeah.
different ways that they use it? So just for our listeners, if you haven't already listened to season one, go back. There's great information there.
Yeah.
I encourage you to take a peek at that. So, so we've talked about our themes. I'm just thinking a little bit more about some of the clients that you and I each work with. I know you
Mhm.
work with a lot of people that are, I think you sort of refer to them as maybe struggling to be seen or heard, or maybe
Yeah.
the outlier.
Hmm.
I think the example you've often used with me is like the woman in a man's sort of dominated field, or vice
Right.
versa. Um, I'm kind of curious about how you see this conversation around engaging customers, or people that are struggling to be heard as they're engaging with customers.
Yeah.
What advice do you have that you would offer for that population?
Yeah. Thanks. And I think this goes back to being aware and taking notice. So, regardless of whether it's a business to business customer or it's your business to customer type of customer, I'm really thinking about like finding those places, really listening and being attentive to what is going on, what might be missing, like Chad said, using his analytical to like find the holes. What is it your client, your customer, whoever it is, what is it they're looking for? And if they're not speaking out, it could be because they've been in this place where they aren't seen and heard very often. So how can you kind of pull that group in? One of the guests that was going to come on with us and wasn't able to make it, they had some great examples about how they were able to, during COVID, when everyone was shut in their homes and we couldn't get together, they were able to engage that population that really wanted to be together. Did he know for sure they wanted to come out and be together? Maybe not. But that's where I'm like talking about using that your initiative, taking your initiative, using your talents to be able to reach out to those people, taking initiative to understand what might be missing, what might be needed that they don't even know they need, that this hasn't been brought to them before. So it's that taking the moment to maybe think about your customer at a deeper level and not anticipate their needs for them, but maybe start to asking more of those questions, like Chad was with his learner, getting to know them and really reach out to understand what some of the pain points might be, and if there's ways that you can help support them in that. And I think this is true not just in coaching, but across all businesses. If someone's anticipating my needs and they put out, I like things to, oh yeah, I like things to be specific and coded for me. So like Yeti anticipating my need of wanting to have a cute logo on my cup, that's a way that businesses and different colors, what they were all one color for the longest time. So it's the way that businesses can anticipate the needs of their customers. And I think that even if you aren't being seen and heard, this is how you can start to reach some of those people.
That's really interesting. It's great to hear that you are focused. Your answer focused much more about finding the outlier within a population and making sure you speak to them.
Mhm.
Um, as I was thinking about this question and thinking about what sort of advice I would give, this is definitely a little bit more Jen's population in terms of who she coaches, but I want to contribute. This is a
Yeah.
podcast for the two of us, and so I wanted to throw some ideas out. So when I got thinking about this question, I was actually picturing it as if you're the outlier sort of service provider or the coach or whatever it is, and
Mhm.
you are entering a field that you might be the outlier. So purely I'm just trying to think of like construction. If you're the female coach going in to a male dominated industry,
Mhm.
or nursing or teaching, it's historically I
Been
think it's
female.
hopefully getting
Mhm.
better, but it's been a little bit historically a little bit more female centered. um so I was thinking about you entering that sort of environment. I was taking that lens on it, and I would offer two thoughts around that, which is really getting to know yourself. If
Yeah.
you are the outlier, know who you are, know how you present yourself, what your themes are, um, even just how you engage with your customers. And um, if you can present yourself in a very genuine way, you're far more likely to make a better impression and build those relationships, and they'll have a better understanding of who you are and what you're looking to serve. Um, in and with that, I would also say, we talk about a lot of talent development as including skills and knowledge, right? So
Mhm.
um, there's skills that go with each of our talents. There's knowledge that goes with each of our talents and talent themes. And so I would encourage you to lean into those skills and knowledge, and essentially the word I wrote down was actually be unavoidable. Like
Yeah.
if they are looking for that level of skill and knowledge, be so remarkable that can't they can't avoid working with you. And so even if you're the male coach going into a female dominated industry, be unavoidable. And just sort of doubling down on those skills and knowledge that really enhance your talents and your skills and knowledge in the environment that you want to most help. I
Yeah.
think is a good place to start. I know I took a
That was
slightly different
great.
lens on
No, I like
Jen's
it.
thing, but I want to be of service to her listeners as well. So
Well,
um,
and I love what you said because you spoke specifically to those who are actually looking to be anticipated for, like, so whereas I was speaking to like how we can anticipate for those who are not speaking out, and you actually spoke directly to those who are feeling like they're not able to speak out. So I love it. We covered all of it. I would love to go to more of that management lens, because that's how we've done all of our other shows, is we talk about these brand new managers. So what advice could you offer to brand new managers in
yeah,
helping them to engage their customers?
yeah. So at the top of the show, I mentioned that there's a great resource from Gallup around building um, customer engagement, and they have this great graphic, and we're actually going to put a link to this. I'm going to make sure that there's a link to this in the show notes, so definitely go and take a look. But they really outline kind of a 6-part cycle, and really quickly, it's know your customer, design engaging experiences, enable your workforce, empower your customer impact teams, deliver high standards of service, and then retain and grow. Build your customer base and market. Okay, so if we think about managers who are in charge of engaging their customers and those 6 realms, I would encourage them, new managers or even existing managers that are trying to do better at this, think about how each of your talent themes hit on each of those 6 items. And so, for example, I was thinking about how my themes, some of my themes might show up, and even some that I don't have, but that might be applicable to somebody. So know your neighbors. We already talked about that. I see that as, maybe learner or includer, figuring out how to get more information or bring more people to the table. Um, so those are two that so struck me. Um, Designing engaging experiences, maybe that's strategic or ideation, coming up with something new for your customers to experience. Enabling your workforce, that might be leaning into developer talents to make sure that you're building the right people with the right experience, coming back to that skills and knowledge and pairing that with
Mm-hmm.
their own talents, any teams
Yep.
you're working with. Also individualization, you know, creating those uh what's the word I'm looking for? Individualized learning plans, so that you're enabling your workforce in a way that um respects their talents. Um, then think about empowering service teams. Like if you are leading a service team, think about what talents you're utilizing to make them feel important. So maybe you're leaning on significance. And again, maybe developer comes back into that conversation of, how do we grow you? How do we let you take charge
Yep.
and create something fantastic? And then delivering high standards, maximizer, discipline were the first that came to mind, saying that
Mm-hmm.
high bar of excellence, making sure that, real high standards. Maybe it's consistency also comes into that you want to treat everybody with a real high level of white glove service. Um, and then also retaining and growing a customer base. So maybe you've got a relator so that you know what your people need, and can listen really intently so that you can retain them and grow them in a new way. Maybe it's even analytical, find the data. What is the data telling you about what are they looking for? How do they want to grow? What do they want next for product or service improvements? So again, finding those holes, right? It's
Yeah.
developing it. So I would, you know, I don't know if you do this exercise with some of your coaching clients, but I will often ask, my clients to list out like their weekly goal or their monthly goal, and then what three talents are you going to utilize to get to that talent, and what does that look
Yep.
like? I think that type of activity would be super helpful for this sort of thing. You put each one of these six things on the end of on six pieces of paper, and
Sure.
then list the three talent themes or four talent themes that will help you get there. So as a new manager, I would be putting that front and center as my maybe one big key of it's sort of one big piece of advice broken into six
Sure.
steps. So
Yeah, I love
so
that.
yeah, so that would be my take. What I know you've worked with a couple managers, and some of them are even new. What advice do you have, and how do you
I,
see talents coming into this?
and I kind of went the same but different way. So this goes back to the best employees or the most engaged employees create the most engaged customers, right? So
Yes.
if we are hoping for engaged customers, it means we need to have engaged employees. If we need engaged employees, it means we need to have engaged managers. So this comes and leaders. So this really, like, we're taking it all the way back, like pulling it back to say, like, the best way I think that we can engage our customers is by finding our own engagement. So that starts, I think, with our managers, and Chad just shared a bunch of ways you can like point different talents at six specific goals in order to get to that customer engagement. And I want to start with even just getting to like know yourself. So we had talked about it in our last episode. We've touched on it again here already. What brings you joy? Where do you stand out? So as a manager, like, how can you use what you know and what brings you joy, where you stand out, to help your own engagement? Because sometimes we as managers and some of those middle managers don't necessarily have that kind of leadership from above. Where can you get some of that mentoringship? Where can you reach out to pour into yourself, to find more about you, to make sure that you are engaged? I think the big piece for me and how I help people typically find their own engagement if they don't have a manager who's great, and we're not talking to that manager in order to help them be more engaging with their people, is to really understand how you can connect your personal values. And again, you can hear my belief coming out, how you can connect your personal values, your mission, your purpose to what it is you do. And then you can model that behavior. So now, whether or not everyone's going to do it the same as you, that's not what we're trying to get to. We're just trying to get to that, like, see my mission and my purpose and what I do and why this is so important to me. Now I can help you, my employees, my team. You are my customers. You are who I want to engage, not necessarily like if we ignore our end users altogether, the people who buy from us, if we completely ignore them, but just deal with our team internally, that team takes care of the end users. So there is a sense, and I'm not suggesting we ignore who our customer is, but if we're a manager and we have a team, if we're taking care of our team is going to take care of our customers. So that's kind of where I brought this all back to full circle. Those engaged employees really do make the best engaged customers. And I think the best way to get those engaged employees is to be engaged yourself as manager. So for you, those new managers out there, if you're looking for ways to connect your mission, values, and purpose to the company's mission, value, and purpose, spend some time understanding yourself and what those things are and how you can find alignment with your company.
Jen, I love everything you just said. I want to sort of reinforce something with just a slightly different lens on it. And I'm trying to figure out if this comment was going to work its way into this episode or not. But I think that it's really important to think about, for most of this episode, we've talked about external customers. The person walking into the local retail shop, or the business to business relationship that we have with some of the organizations we've worked with. Those are all great and fine. But particularly as we're talking about leaders, new leaders, we can also add to that those individuals that are trying to create engaged, essentially, customers within their own organizations.
Yes.
So maybe you are serving up information or product that some other department then goes and uses.
Yes.
Understanding their needs and how they want something designed and how you want to enable them and how you want to empower all 6 of those components. Thinking about that from an internal perspective is equally applicable. And so bringing it back around to what you were saying about managers is your team are essentially your customers.
Right.
So yes, we have the Q12 to go to. We also have these 6 statements that go to around customer-centric approach. But it all ties together that they are looking at you. They are the customers that are coming to your table and looking for support, development, growth. And those tie into the Q12 that you were referencing. So I wanted to mention that we've talked a little bit sort of that external customer, employee, the internal relationships, the internal customer of exchanging information, exchanging products is equally important. So if you're a listener and you're in that sort of environment, everything we've talked about in this episode is equally applicable. It just maybe with a slightly different lens.
Right.
So I just wanted to add that to all the awesome statements you made about mission, vision, applying talents, purpose, delivering toward those goals. So I love it.
Me too.
I love everything.
Me too.
We've covered a lot. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to highlight as we wrap up? This is because we don't have a guest, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode, but I don't want it to lose the high points. So is there anything you'd come back and just put an extra little stamp on?
I think going back to that, if you're taking care of your employees, if you're taking care of those around you, ultimately those around you then will take care of those around them. So this is like a pay it forward kind of thing as far as engagement goes. And it's the best way to do it is to start with yourself to make sure that you are fully locked into what you're doing.
Boy, you almost took the words out of my mouth. That was going to be one of my key points. I would also just think that I would just reinforce that we've talked about these 6 customer-centric approach components, and that to really think about how you individually deliver those.
Yeah.
The place I would go. So that activity that I mentioned, I think would be the one thing that's sort of a call to action or action item coming, as you get off this podcast,
Right.
pull out a piece of paper, put those 6 down. As I said, we'll have a link to that resource in the show notes. But go put a first draft of that together and see where you're excelling, where you think you've got talents that contribute, and maybe you need to go find some partnerships to then deliver on those those customer promises. So that would be my only wrap up thought. I would just finish out by saying that Jen and I stand ready to help any of our listeners try to address any of this. And as you consider this episode and take it to action, I'm going to keep encouraging you to play to your strengths.
And be uniquely you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts.